Wednesday, January 25th, 2012, Tanya lesson with Rabbi Yarden, lesson number 2.
Alright, we're going to start the second class. We picked, last time we went through who the Baal Shem Tov was, what the Baal Shem Tov's message was. He was the founder of this idea of Chassidicism, or however you want to call it, the Chassidic philosophy, how he passed this message on to his successor, the Maggid, and how the Maggid passed it on to the Alter Rebbe, which is the beginning of Chabad philosophy, and how the Alter Rebbe wrote a book about it, which is actually very contrary to Chassidic philosophy. Chassidic philosophy was that it should not be written, it's a secret. It was considered the secret of the Torah, and the Alter Rebbe, this first Chabad Rebbe, took it and put it out in public. And this was a lot of contest from his colleagues about why he did this and how this worked. And that's where we left off. And the book that he wrote is the Tanya. So now we're going to move into what this book is. To start, the Alter Rebbe never met the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov actually, he met him once. The Baal Shem Tov set it up that he did not want to meet the Alter Rebbe. The way it works is that if the Alter Rebbe would have met the Baal Shem Tov, he would have become his follower and not the Maggid's follower. They're supposed to be a chain. And had the Alter Rebbe skipped the second person, he would have been up at the top and wouldn't have been in the proper place in his chain, so to speak. There's actually a story that the Baal Shem Tov came to the Alter Rebbe's third birthday, which the custom is to cut a boy's hair at the age of 3. And the Baal Shem Tov cut his hair. And the Alter Rebbe kept asking, who is that person with the orange beard, which was the Baal Shem Tov. And the Baal Shem Tov had told the Alter Rebbe's family not to tell him who he was. So they kept making up answers. He's this uncle, he's this person, he's that person, he came for this reason. And the Alter Rebbe kept saying, no, but who is he? Or, okay, but who is he? And he repeatedly asked, and they didn't know what to say. And either the Alter Rebbe's mother or his aunt told him, this is the Zayda, this is your grandfather. But this the Alter Rebbe stopped asking. And you see a lot in the Alter Rebbe's discourses, or whenever he quotes the Baal Shem Tov, at times he'll quote him as the grandfather, because he viewed himself as a grandfather. In Judaism, it says that if someone's your teacher, they're as if they're your father, they're your spiritual father. So technically, the Baal Shem Tov was his grandfather, because the Alter Rebbe's teacher was the Maggid, and his teacher was the Baal Shem Tov. So if the Maggid was the Alter Rebbe's spiritual father, the Baal Shem Tov was his grandfather. The Alter Rebbe never really met the Baal Shem Tov. The Alter Rebbe's first time coming to Chassidus was to the Maggid when he was, the Alter Rebbe was 15 and a half when the Baal Shem Tov passed away, and when he was 19 was the first time he rolled into the Maggid. He came in, and he stayed a little while, and the Maggid, according to Chabad philosophy, the Maggid was told by the Baal Shem Tov that there's a student that's going to come to you, and he is the one who's going to carry on the lineage. And the Alter Rebbe came in, and the Maggid was very excited. The Alter Rebbe stayed a little while and decided this wasn't for him. He didn't want to be in this community. And he picked up and left. And the Maggid was a little bit, I guess upset at the time because the Alter Rebbe left. Meanwhile, the Alter Rebbe, for whatever reasons, came back. He forgot something and he had to come back. So he was on his journey, I think he forgot his coat or something, and he came back. And when he came back, he decided to, if he's back already, he'll stay a little bit longer. And this time he went in to meet the Maggid. And he asked the Maggid a question. He asked him some questions in Gemara and Talmud and study, and the Maggid answered them. And then he said, I have a problem. He said, in my entire life, I never struggled for anything. Everything came, intellectually wise, everything came simply. He said, I mastered the Torah, I mastered the Talmud, I mastered sciences, I mastered mathematics, and I never struggled, and I want to struggle in something. And the Maggid answered, he said, you're about to start struggling, and then he told him that the Baal Shem Tov decided that the Alter Rebbe was going to be the one to compile a work that would be a book on Chassidus, on how to serve God. And with this, the Maggid gave the Alter Rebbe a lot of instruction about different things he had to do to prepare himself. And the goal was to make the Alter Rebbe work spiritually. In other words, he was going to start striving and working in spiritual aspects. And the Alter Rebbe did work. He strived in a lot of different ways. He was the youngest follower of the Maggid. The average follower was 35, 40, 45, 50 and older. They were people that spent years mastering the Torah. And here was this kid who was 19 years old. Yet the Maggid put a lot of attention and time into him. But either way, the Alter Rebbe wrote this book. This book was compiled in 4 stages. When the Alter Rebbe opened up his own, once the Maggid passed away and he started his own movement, his own group, the Alter Rebbe first started with something called the Yechidus. A Yechidus is a private meeting with a Rebbe, with one of these spiritual giants. And the idea is that they would look at your soul, and they would say where in your soul you're struggling. They would give you a message that was for your soul. Maybe your soul struggles would be in your emunah, in your belief in God, or in your trust, but they would identify the cavity, so to speak, in your soul and say, this is what you have to work on. It's considered a very spiritual, moving connection. In Kabbalah and Chassidus, it's explained there's 5 levels of the soul: Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechida. And it says the highest, most inner level of your soul is your Yechida, is your unity of your soul. It's your unity of your soul that's unified with God. So we have like the more revealed parts of your soul, your day-to-day actions would be your lowest level. When you wake up, your soul infuses your body. But the highest level is your Yechida. And why it's called Yechidus is because it's this Rebbe looking and uniting with this Yechida, understanding where you're struggling and how that comes out in your soul. If you're struggling with belief, this is affecting all the 5 levels of your soul, and if you correct on the highest level, it'll affect all the levels. And this is what they would do. And he would give answers, which are answers that we find in this book, but he would say it orally. Then over time, after he was having these followers and having these meetings and giving these answers, he started saying these answers publicly. He said them in discourses. He would come together and he would say a discourse about if someone was struggling in this is in this, and he would go through the different steps. The third phase was after he had done all this a couple times, he started to compile pamphlets. And he started handing out pamphlets to his followers. And his followers would study these pamphlets. At this point, he compiled, I think it was 43 pamphlets. And he made the pamphlets, and the followers were collecting them, and they realized that these pamphlets were going somewhere. And after this, the followers came to him and said, I think it's time to print a book. At this point, he took all the pamphlets and he worked them over again. He went through them a couple times until he decided it was time for printing. Now, when he actually printed the pamphlets the first time, before he printed a book, that's when he stopped doing so many private meetings. He would stop calling people in for private meetings. He said, look at the pamphlets. The answers are there. Look for them. And the followers were very upset about this. They said, we don't want pamphlets. We want a person. A person has an interpersonal relationship, and this is just a book. And as they realized that he wasn't going to give them the time he used to give them because it was growing and growing, that's when they said, well, we need to print this book then. It can't just be that we have these pamphlets. And that's how the book formed. Now I want to say, I'm going to compare this to actually the big book for a minute, but not to compare the two, but they are similar in a way. The idea about the big book, how it worked, is that, at least from my understanding, is that there was this thing that started and was working and was growing, and there was no way to relay the message of what was working and what was growing. So we said, let's write a user manual of what's working, what's growing, and let's give that out to people that can read it and understand it. And from my understanding also was given with the understanding that you don't just read the book. You read the book with someone else that guides you on how the book works. You don't just pick, oh, I get this. You work it with somebody until you get it. That's the way I understand that a book was started. Now, the Tanya was obviously started before this, but it was started in a very similar framework. It was not meant to be read by oneself. It was meant to be read with someone else. One does not do soul searching, soul working. They don't do spiritual connecting by themselves. That doesn't work. What they do is with someone else guiding them, they work through a book. And this book wasn't meant to be a book of philosophy. It was meant to be a book, a user manual on how to work on your soul. And therefore, one needed a teacher, a guide. Now, in Chassidus, this is called a mashpia. A mashpia is someone you call, you read this book with them, you work with them. Today, not necessarily do they work directly out of the book, but in the earlier years, that's exactly what they would do. They would work from the book. Even the Rebbe, the Rebbe who was the last leader of Chabad, in the earlier years, whenever people would write in questions to him, he would say, I suggest you read the Tanya with a mashpia, or I suggest you look back in the Tanya. It's meant to have the answers. Later years, he had his own books, and people would study his books too. But that's what it is. It's a guide on your soul, on your spirituality. Now, on the first page of the Tanya, and in the first editions, pretty much all it said was that it is a Sefer Shel Beinanim. A Beinoni, the word Beinoni means an average person. If you want three terms, there's Rasha, who's wicked, Beinoni, who's in the middle, and Tzaddik, who's righteous. There is, it's brought down from the Frierdiker Rebbe that there was a book written for righteous people. The Alter Rebbe wrote this book, and he wrote a book for righteous people, for tzaddikim. When we study this book, we realize that we're lucky if we reach the level of Beinoni. I don't even know where tzaddik begins or ends. But there was a book that he wrote for righteous, perfect people. And he showed it to somebody. There was somebody named the Shpoel Zaydet. And the Shpoel Zaydet went to visit the Alter Rebbe. And the Alter Rebbe said, hey, check out this book that I wrote. Because the Shpoel Zaydet was a righteous person. He said, check out this book. And the Shpoel Zaydet read it. He enjoyed the book very much. He read it cover to cover. And he said, that was a wonderful book. But why did you write it? He's like, if you write a book that's for everybody, so good. It's a book for everybody. What was the point in writing this book? There's no one who's going to read it. How many righteous people are in the world that are actually going to read and enjoy this book? And what are you going to publish it for? People are going to read it. Possibly they'll despair. Like, we can't reach that. So the Shpoel Zaydet said, I suggest you burn the book, and it would be my greatest wish that my soul elevate to heaven with the book, with the ashes of this book. The Alter Rebbe did not burn the book. But years and years later, there was a fire in Lubavitch, and the fire consumed the Alter Rebbe's home, and it did burn the book. And on that day was when the Shpoel Zaydet passed away. So in essence, he did go up at that time. After it burned, the Alter Rebbe turned to his son, the Mitzler Rebbe, and the Alter Rebbe asked him if he had ever read this book. He said, did you ever open up the book? And the Mitzler Rebbe said, I saw this book. This was the Alter Rebbe's son. He said, I saw the book, and I saw on the front, he wrote, if you open it, you're cursed in this world and in the world to come. And I said, it's not worth it for me. I don't want to get cursed in this world and the world to come, so I didn't open it. So Alter Rebbe said, Oy, where is the mysterious nefesh for chassidus? In other words, who cares about this world and the world to come? You had a chance to understand how to serve God better, and you gave it up. And he got upset at it. He's like, you should have read it. Who cares about a curse from this world and the world to come? You could have connected to God even better. But with this, that was the end of the book. We don't have any trace or knowledge of what that book was about. All we have is this book. This book was meant for us. Now this book, under the term, under this wording, Sefer Shel Beinoni, he explains what the book is going to be about. He says, this book is coming to explain a pasuk, a verse in the Torah. The verse in the Torah says, this matter is close to you, in your mouth, in your heart, to do. And he says, that's what the book is coming to explain. Some books in Judaism come to explain many things, and some books in Judaism come to explain only one point. There's a book called the Megala Amukos. It comes to explain one verse in the Torah, and it gives 252 explanations to it. There's another book in Zohar that comes to explain one point in the Torah. You do see this at points. A book that says, I am going to explain one line. And for this, I'd like to read to you what the Torah is talking about. We should understand this line.
Continue.
This line is Moshe. He's giving his last speech or lecture to Israel. And he says that there is a mitzvah that I'm commanding you today. It is not hidden from you, and it is not distant. It is not in the heavens. For you will say, how can we ascend to the heavens and take it for us, so that we can listen and perform it? Nor is it across the sea, for you to say, who can cross the sea for us to take it, so we can listen and perform it? Rather, the matter is very near to you. It is in your mouth and your heart to perform it. That's what Moses says. There's a question asked, what is this command? What command is Moses talking about? Moses says in the Torah, towards the end of his life, so he's giving his last speech, there is this commandment that's very dear, very important. It's not in the heavens. It's not across the sea. It's right here for you to do. The Ramban, which is Nachmanides, writes this mitzvah is teshuvah. It's repentance. Repentance isn't very far away. It's very close, and it can be done. The idea is that even if repentance was very far away, one would have to do it. They would have to do whatever it was to do. But nevertheless, since it's not, we should for sure do it. Now, the Alter Rebbe gives a slightly different explanation of what this mitzvah is. What is this mitzvah that we must do? It's Judaism, so to speak. It's the connection to God. We must connect and relate to God in our lives. And therefore, how do you read it according to the Alter Rebbe, these few verses? This commandment that I'm commanding you today, it's not hidden from you. And if it was, we would have to figure out how to do it anyways. If it was in the heavens, we would have to figure out how to get to the heavens, because we'd have to connect to God. If it's across the sea, then we would have to figure out how to get across the sea, because we have to connect to God. But it's not. It's right in front of us. It's in our thought, our speech, and our performance. In other words, it's all within us to do. It may sound simple. It's a lot of work, obviously, to bring God into our day-to-day lives, but it's not something that is impossible for us to do. It's not something that we have to climb to the heavens somehow. It's not something we have to build a ship. It's right in front of us to do. Now, there are commentaries that explain all the things that it's not are levels in righteous people. In other words, it's not in the heavens. It explains how you can have levels of heavenly perception. It's not across the sea. The sea is a depth of Torah knowledge. So therefore, these are things that for some people it is, if you're truly righteous and you've mastered the Torah. So then, really it is across the sea, and you have to go across the sea to connect to God on that plane. If one is really righteous and they understand the different spheres and they see the different spheres of godliness, so for them, that's their level. But the level for us isn't that. The level for us is just connecting to God in our thought, our speech, and our action. Now, that is a simple line, but a complex phrase. Obviously, how does one actually get their thought, speech, and action unified with God? And that's what the book comes to explain. The book comes to explain the makeup of the soul, and then how that soul can connect to God in different ways. After that, the Alter Rebbe writes he's going to explain this in a long and short way. And the question is, what does this mean? There's a Talmud, there's a Gemara that explains that there was, I think it was a Yasi, there was a teacher, and he said, I heard a story from a boy and from a girl. And the story from the boy, it goes on this phrase. The story from the boy is that he was walking to a town once, and the path came to like a fork, a split, and there was a boy sitting at the fork. And this teacher asked, which way goes to the town? And the boy said, well, you can go this way, and it's a short but long way, or you can go this way, it's a long but short way. And the teacher was like, I just want to know how to get to the town. I don't want to know you're like cute, So he figured that the first word was the main word. If you go this way, it's a short way, but it's long. It's not so short. If you go this way, it's a long way, but it's not so long. It's really short. So he figured if he had a choice going to the short way, which isn't so short, or the long way, which isn't so long, he would take the short way because the short way is still shorter. And he went the short way. And he comes a few hundred paces, and he gets to the edge of the town. But as he approaches the town from the short way, he sees that there's a swamp, and there's thorns, and it's impassable to get to the town. So he goes back, and he takes the long way. And he goes a long way, and it's a trodden path. It's longer. It takes him a lot longer to get there, but he gets there. It's a path that works, and he gets to the town. And what the Alter Rebbe is saying is, first of all, what the teacher said is that in life there's two types of paths. There's a short path, which doesn't get you anywhere. It really takes longer. There's a quick fix, which isn't really a fix. Or then there's the real fix. There's the real path. There's the real work, which will get you where you need to go. And in the long run, that's shorter. Because you really did it and you'll really get there, as opposed to the short fixes, which at the end of the day, the thing is still broken. And what the Alter Rebbe is saying is when we're talking about connecting ourselves to God, I'm going to give you not the quick fix. I'm going to give you the long path, which is really shorter. I'm going to give you the long way, which in the end will be shorter, because first of all, it'll work and you'll get there. But it's going to be harder. It's going to be longer. This is how he preempts his Tanya. That's how he introduces it. Now, on the opening page, that was the entire opening page in the original prints. The Alter Rebbe did not write his name. He actually called it Likutei Amarim. The name of this book is a collection of sayings. He writes that all I did was take a few snippets of sayings and I compiled them. I didn't make any original work here. It's all old sayings. And he didn't write his name. He was very humble or quiet or private about his involvement. Everyone knew it was him. And later on, in later years, they added his name. That was his work. But in the original prints, it wasn't like he wasn't bragging about it. He just said, I'm taking a few lines and I'm putting it together. Now, this book the Tanya is the first Hasidic work that we have in our chain, but it sets the framework of how it works. It starts, when we get there, it'll start quoting a Talmud passage. It starts with a Talmud, it starts with a question. Some people look at Hasidic ideology as separate from Judaism. In other words, you have the Torah, you have the Bible, you have what was given from God, you have the Nevi'im, the prophets, you have the Ksuvim, the writings, you have the Mishnah, which is what the rabbis took out of the Torah as laws, you have the commentary on that, the questions, the Talmud, and you see a direct chain from all that. Then all of a sudden you have this new trend that started, which was Hasidic philosophy, Hasidic ideology, new frameworks, and it doesn't connect to the Torah. You have mysticism, and then you have the Torah. And a lot of people, even today, consider them two separate things. There's Kabbalah, and then there's Torah, and they're not the same thing. One is intellectual, it's laws, it's complexities, and one is this Kabbalah. And the idea of what he's starting with a question from Nigla, from the Talmud, is he's saying it doesn't work that way. It's all one Torah. It's all one thought process. And throughout the years, people have challenged us. They said they're two separate things. One is a spiritual service, and one is a intellectual pursuit. And they're two separate things. You can't say the intellectual answer is a spiritual service. You can't say a spiritual service connects to intellectual pursuit. They're two separate things. But he, by opening the book like this, started this trend that that's not what it is. It's the same thing. For example, there was a chassan, someone who was engaged to get married, from one of the different Hasidic sects, not from Chabad, but one of the other sects. They came in to the Rebbe to meet the Rebbe in New York. They came into the Rebbe, and the Rebbe asked them what they're learning in Talmud. So they said, I have two study periods a day. In the morning I'm studying one Talmud. In the afternoon I'm studying a different Talmud, different partners, different study things. This is what I'm studying. And the Rebbe asked them, which one are you more comfortable with? And they said, one of the two, like I'm more fluent in this one. The Rebbe said, can I ask you a couple questions on it? Sure. And he started with a question. He asked a very basic question, this Talmud that the person was studying. And they answered the question. And on the answer they gave, he said, now I want to ask you a second question. And he asked them a second question. And the second question, the person stopped and said, I don't know the answer. And the Rebbe answered them. He said, to this question, there is no answer in the Talmud. The Talmud does not answer this question. Except for this question, Hasidus, these types of books will answer the question. They gave him an answer. And after that, he told him, he said, and it's not because they're two separate things. It's because they're one thing. One cannot have my spirituality and my intellectualism separate. They have to meld. They have to mesh. They go together. In other words, this isn't separate. It's not like I study Tanya separately from my day-to-day life. It's to teach me how God is prevalent in every part of my day-to-day life. It's part of Torah. And he said that this is the way Torah works. It's all one unity. It's one body of knowledge. Now, what this book is going to work on is Beinani. We'll talk about that for a little bit, and then we'll do questions and go forward. A Beinani, we said, is somebody in the middle. And according to Torah, even according to Code of Jewish Law, when they explain a middle person, it's the basic explanation which seems to make sense. If someone did more good than bad in their life, they're righteous. If someone did more bad than good in their life, they're wicked. And if someone's somewhere in the middle, they're average. They're a Beinani. They're in the middle. There's a famous thing about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. In Rosh Hashanah, there's two books, or there's three books. There's the book of life, there's the book of death, and then there's the book of undecided. That's where they always say on Rosh Hashanah, you get inscribed in the two, either you get inscribed in the two books, but you don't get sealed, and on Yom Kippur you get sealed, or you could say that there's multiple ideas, but you're getting written for a bad year, or for a year of troubles, or you're getting written for a year of good. And then there's people that are undecided. And the undecided people, they go from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur to decide where to place them. Or you could say that you get sealed, you get written in automatically somewhere, but when Yom Kippur comes, that's when you finally get sealed. So you spend those days in reflection, repentance, trying to get your judgment to the best possible place. That's for Code of Jewish Law. When someone passes away, Their deeds are brought before them, and there's a scale, and the scale is weighed, and based on their actions, that will be their path of where it'll take them in the afterlife. That is not the measuring system that he's using here. The measuring system he's using here is a different measuring system entirely. It's not as simple. What he's calling the middle person is something that every person who's in that middle category can attain. It's the maximum potential that any of us can attain. In other words, if you want to put three categories, wicked, righteous, and middle person. So let's start with the righteous. Righteous people have a maximum that they can attain. They have something in their life, they have their maximum potential that they can attain. And their maximum potential they can attain is not the same as what we can attain. A righteous person's mission in life is not the same mission as us. If a righteous person were to, after he passed away, go before God and say, I spent my whole life connected to you, it's like, big whoop. Of course you did. You're righteous. You live in a godly sphere. You live in a spiritual plane. Of course you were connected to me. But what did you do? Well, for us, if we would say that we lived our entire life connected to God, that'd be phenomenal. That'd be amazing. We lived a spiritual, godly life when that wasn't what our plan was. And for the wicked, they have their own mission. So what he's defining here is, this is the book for us middle people of what is the maximum potential we can attain. There's a story about Reb Zusha from Annapolis. His entire life he said, when I pass away, they're not going to ask me, why weren't you like Moses? Or why aren't you like Aaron? They're going to say, why weren't you like Zusha? And the idea is that when they pass away, they're not going to match them up to Moses or Aaron. They're going to say, this was Zusha's potential, and you didn't do that. You didn't live up to your potential. And here this book is going to outline a very heavy framework, a very rigid framework, but it's the maximum framework that we can attain. Some people say it's not fair. Every soul is created equally. Every soul is on the same framework. And some souls, or every person is, some people attain more. But really, if I wanted to, I could reach I could be righteous. Chabad philosophy or Chabad ideology does not believe in that. We don't believe that we're all created equally and some people become righteous and some people become wicked. We believe that there's different categories of souls. We believe that Baal Shem Tov, for example, had a very great, powerful soul, and therefore to match ourselves up against the Baal Shem Tov isn't fair. It's not fair to say, well, we weren't the Baal Shem Tov. We weren't a third of the Baal Shem Tov. The Alter Rebbe had a great soul, a great intellectual capacity also, and we didn't match up to him. It's brought down that the Baal Shem Tov, it's brought down, I think, in the Alter Rebbe writes, maybe not, but the Baal Shem Tov spoke at 3 months. He was talking. So to say that we're matched up to that isn't fair. It's not, because it wasn't physically possible for me to start talking at 3 months. But he was talking at 3 months. It's not a fair matchup. We can match up to who our soul is. Some people say that's not fair. Everyone's created equal. Everyone has equal potential. But in practicality, we're not all equal. There's men and there's women and they're different people. And to say they're all equal and they have the same mission in life is not realistic. It's not the way it is. And so too in life, we're each put in different categories. People are born into rich families. People are born into poorer families. People are born into families with connections, families without connections. People are born with diseases and people are born without diseases. With handicaps, without handicaps. And to say that we're all equal isn't fair because we're not all equal. We all have very different aspects in our lives that make us who we are. And what the Alter Rebbe is saying here is that this book is geared towards one type of soul, a general type of soul, which the general populace could fall within. But again, it's not a cookie-cut book. It's not like we can all say, since we all do come from different frameworks, it won't work that way. We do need a mashpia, a guide, to take us through this book, to fit it to us. But this is what our potential could be, how we can reach the maximum potential. To give you an idea of what that is there's a person, in the first chapter we're going to read about it, named Rabbah. And Rabbah is someone who's brought in the Talmud repeatedly. And Rabbah is one of the greatest sages of the Talmud. And he said, when talking about this term Beinani, he said, like I'm a Beinani. And the question is, how does that work? He was a sage in the Talmud who was righteous and he was great, and he's the Beinani, then I'm not even the Rasha then. That's how low. I'm not even the wicked person if he's the middle guy. And it says that he was a righteous person. He wasn't a Beinani, but it shows what the potential of a Beinani is, what the potential of a middle person is. We can be on that framework. We can reach true greatness. It just takes a lot of work. And that's what this book outlines, is what that greatness is and what that work entails. But it's a lot of spiritual work. Should we pause for questions?
Yeah.